So how can we, as Canadians, navigate this? The Prime Minister appointed 2 people to specifically advise him on how to combat anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and they're here today together right now. Deborah Lyons is Canada's new Special Envoy on Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism. Ms. Lyons recently replaced Irwin Cotler in that role, and Amira Elghawaby is Canada's first Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia. Hello to both of you. Thank you very much for making time for this conversation and for being here together. I appreciate it. Ms. Lyons, I'll start with you. What do you hope both of you being here for this conversation together says to Canadians?
I hope what it says to Canadians is that we have to come together, all Canadian communities, all Canadian leadership, to address this almost unprecedented time of pain and suffering and confusion. And I think anxiety about the future that our people are feeling right now. So I hope Amira and I work very closely together, and I think it's important that we demonstrate to Canadians that even during a time of fracture and pain, we as Canadians come together based on our Canadian values, compassionately, respectfully, to work together, even when we disagree, but to work together toward the kind of Canada we want to have.
What do you hope, Ms. Elghawaby, that this demonstrates to Canadians?
Well, I think so many Canadians are feeling excruciating pain right now. And I think it's really important for us to take a moment to acknowledge that. Yet despite this pain, we also know that we have cherished values in Canada that we need to lean in a moment, especially like this one that we're in. And so myself and Special Envoy Lyons, you know, we have had very many discussions along with other leadership around, you know, despite all that we're seeing on our screens, people are feeling the agony of watching loved ones killed and suffering right now, that we have to find a way forward here in Canada on how are we going to heal, how are we going to ensure that people have the freedom to share their pain, they're able to demonstrate who they are, what they believe in, what they want to see from their governments, all while respecting social unity, all while respecting what it means to be Canadian in a very difficult and fraught moment like this one.
And I do want to talk about kind of your thoughts on the path forward, but first I think it's important to kind of contextualize what we're talking about. And Ms. Lyons in particular, I wanted to ask both of you, but I'll start with you, about what you are hearing from Jewish Canadians about what they are facing since October 7th. Because those I have interviewed have talked to me, for example, about how they did not grow up having to confront any of this, and that this is the most anti-Semitism they have seen since the Second World War.
Oh, I think absolutely. And again, as Amira was saying, the first thing that we're hearing from our communities, I'm certainly hearing from the Jewish community, and extremely painfully so since October 7th, is just the agony that people feel about what happened on October 7th, but then added to that is the anti-Semitism rise that we've seen in Canada since then. There's no question that we were seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, which you often do in societies when they're stressed or strained, even just simply economically. But what we're seeing in 2023, and most certainly since October 7th, is a huge spike. And it is causing people to feel unsafe and not supported and insecure in their own communities and worried about their children going to school, as we've seen in Montreal and as I've been hearing as I travel across Canada. I also am very committed to this because I have lived and worked as a diplomat in countries where you could see the sliding back of democratic values, of openness, of justice, of support for rule of law. I see how quickly it happens. We cannot allow it to happen in Canada, and our Jewish community certainly doesn't want that to happen.
Ms. Elghawaby, what are you hearing from Muslim Canadians? As I was preparing for this interview, I was remembering about a decade ago, I was interviewing you almost every day after the ISIS attacks, and in particular the attack on Parliament Hill. And I remember you sharing the stories of the degree to which Muslim Canadians at that point felt the target of a lot of hate. Is this comparable to that? Is it different? What are you hearing?
Vassi, absolutely. I mean, this is certainly bringing up a lot of very painful memories for Muslims in Canada, as well as Arabs and Palestinians, who are also seeing almost the repeat of what we saw post 9/11, where our communities were brushed with one brush, that we had to prove our loyalty all over again, that we have to somehow try to justify why we want to participate, why people want to participate in peaceful demonstrations, to express themselves, which are charter rights and freedoms, and yet somehow there is this polarization in our society where waving a Palestinian flag or waving a keffiyeh, that these types of activities, which are protected rights, what Canadians, have fought for in preserving in this country, that somehow is being equated with hate. That's very troubling and very dangerous. And I think what we can all agree is that, of course, we stand against anti-Semitism, of course we stand against Islamophobia, and we have to stand for our inclusive values, but all while respecting our rights to express ourselves and to, share in this society in ways that allow us all to feel seen, feel heard, and respected.
And I think, what Amira is saying absolutely is so true, but we're not seeing peaceful demonstrations. We're seeing a more, I would say, verbally aggressive stance, in some cases violence, and we're dealing, as the Jewish community across Canada, with incidents of real physical harm, vandalism of property, and people being afraid to send their kids to school, especially when you get a global call for a day of hate. I mean, these kinds of incidents are ones where I think our leadership, and that's where Amir and I working together, and our leaderships in our communities, and frankly, provincial governments, mayors, the ministers here, I think, are responding as much as we possibly can.
Well, let me ask you about that, because I think part of what it is that views on this are not brand new, right? There's a long history to this conflict in the Middle East, and therefore that's informing the degree to which people's views are ingrained. I think a lot of Canadians right now are watching this all unfold and worried that the temperature, Ms. Elghawaby, can't be turned down. How would you address that?
So you're right, Vasya. On the one hand, just as Lyons has mentioned, we are seeing some violence, some harassment against Jewish communities as well as against Muslim and Arab communities in Canada. Women like myself who wear the hijab have been spat on, have been harassed, have actually been assaulted as well. So we recognize that leadership is so crucial right here, right now, to ensure that whatever we are saying, on the other hand, is about coming together respectfully in constructive dialogue, creating space for education, and ensuring that we are, yes, having respectful dialogue, understanding that some discourse, not everyone's going to agree, as we understand, but it must be done in ways that, are rooted again in those values of what it means to be Canadian, what it means to live in a country of so many backgrounds. People from around the world come and make their homes here.
I'm unfortunately running out of time, which I wish I weren't because it's such an important topic, but I did want to sort of circle back to where we started and ask you both for a concluding comment. Ms. Lyons, you first. And it's around this. You're both here talking about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. I get email messages and messages on social media saying, why are politicians or you or others talking about it in the same sentence? Don't equate the one with the other. But I'm wondering what you would say in response to that about the significance of having a conversation like this one, even though that is a very real concern of people.
Absolutely, and we're very aware of that concern as we engage in this interview, and we're going to be doing more of this, frankly. Look, I am going to present very strongly in all of my meetings the position of the Jewish community in Canada, their fear, their anxiety about the next day, what's going to happen. And that is very important to bring to Canadians right across the country. I mean, it is completely unprecedented. We've never seen this before. But I know that the way out of this is from our communities coming together. We have got to find the way in this teaching moment for Canada to navigate to a better Canada. This is a huge challenge, but we cannot fail at it. And we'll only succeed if we're able to demonstrate that the communities come together.
Ms. Elghawaby, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we have to, as Canadians, think about what's at stake. What's at stake is our social unity. For Muslims in Canada who have seen the largest number of Islamophobic killings of any other G7 country, we're actually still seeing the termination of the trial in the Afzal family attack in London, Ontario. You know, Islamophobia has deadly consequences, and I think when we're seeing a moment where there's so much divisive rhetoric that it puts, frankly, you know, a real concern for our communities about our collective safety. I think this is really a moment where, as I mentioned, leaders have to step up. We have to lean in to what will get us through this.
Okay, on that note, I'll leave it. I really appreciate both of you coming in for this. Thank you so much, Deborah Lyons and Amira Elghawaby.
Thank you.